What's up guys, how you doing? Welcome to another video. Today we are talking Lightroom editing tips. I've got 5 tips for you that I think are going to make your editing better, easier for you to do and quicker. Now these tips are things I'm going to show you in Lightroom, but they don't just apply to Lightroom. They will apply to any editing software that you use. I hope you guys can hear me okay. The rain is bad today, and unfortunately the room where I shoot my videos is kind of like a conservatory type building, so the rain affects it quite a bit. I've waited for it to stop raining, I've had no luck, so we're going to crack on anyway, and I'm sure you will be able to hear me just fine. Before we get into the tips themselves, I'm going to ask you to do all the usual YouTube stuff for me. Hit that like button, make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Really appreciate it, and it helps me out a lot on this channel. So the way we're going to do this video is we're going to spin round onto the computer. I'm going to show you some screenshots, and I'll talk to you a little bit as well about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And we're going to show you 5 great tips. So right, let's spin round, let's get on the computer, and let's have a look at them. Okay, so here we are in Lightroom, guys, and we're going to use some photos that I took at the one of the playoff finals. This was the League 2 playoff final at Wembley. So I thought we'd use a few images from here to show you a few of my tips. So look, straight in, tip number 1 is going to be to say, don't be entirely afraid of some of the auto settings. Now, that doesn't mean that you want to just go all in and change everything to auto and let it fully control your image, because you see when I've done that here, this is a bit dark, some of the shadows are a little bit too low, and so that hasn't helped us. But what we can do is to use some of the auto settings. So first of all, I'm just going to get my crop right. This isn't a tip. You guys know I'm always going to crop and straighten my images. So let's check that we're happy with that, which we are. And then we're going to edit this photo. So by auto settings, one of the ones which I am generally not afraid to use is the white balance auto. So this currently is as shot. It's not bad, but maybe, you know, the green or the amount of green has slightly thrown it off. So let's see what happens if we go to auto. There we go. It's made it slightly more blue, slightly more green. It doesn't mean the image is done. We've still got some exposure and contrast and highlights and stuff to play with here. But actually, the white balance isn't too far off. Maybe slightly too much blue for me. You can see a lot of blue here in the white. So I'm gonna bring this back slightly on the blue, so it's a little bit more yellow than it was. But overall, that's not bad. Maybe touch too much green. You can see in the face, but it's given me a closer starting point than I had without using the auto white balance. So that's something which I quite like. Not necessarily a tip, and I actually don't use it that much, but just in case anyone isn't sure, this little white dropper here, the way you can use this is by selecting something that you know is pure white. So the football probably is pure white. You do that, and what you're telling this is, hey, look, that football was white, so base the white balance off the white of the football. Now, with a lot of images, and you can see it's done it with this one, it won't get it quite right. It's added way too much pink, and this now looks too pink here. But that's just to kind of explain to you what this is for. You can certainly use this if you're doing like portraits with white backgrounds and stuff like that. But we're going to go to auto, and we're going to tone off the yellow a little bit, and we're going to tone off the green slightly. So that's kind of where we're going to go with our white balance for now. So there you go, that's tip number 1. Don't be afraid to use some of the auto settings. Now, of course, the other way that you can use auto settings, or not quite auto settings, is through using Lightroom presets. Now, look, this, I guess, is an obvious plug for me because I have my own preset set up. I'm going to use my sports starter preset on this image, and what that does is it automatically tweaks a few settings for me to get it just how I want it to be. I still need to play with this. The image is still a bit too dark, etc., but it's giving me a great starting point. A little bit of contrast, clarity, and things like that on there. You can get this preset for free. I mean, you don't even have to download it if you don't want to. You can pretty much see what I've done with it on the side here. If you just want to copy it, you can. If you want to make it easier for yourself, you can download this preset for free on my website. You just go to robsamplesphotography.com. You go to the Lightroom preset section, and you'll see you can download this one for free. I've got lots of others as well, which will have different effects. Dramatic black and white I use a lot. Things like a red lift is quite cool for a different type of effect. All the reds, you can see you can do all kinds of different things using some of these presets. All of those presets are available on my website as well if you want to go check those out. Really recommend it. I use them all the time. If I was trying to make a black and white image here, I could just apply the dramatic black and white preset, and I've got a real good starting point to go with a black and white image, which gives me a much better starting point than if I just desaturated it fully, which a lot of people do. If you compare that black and white image with that one, for example, you see it's much, much better. So the presets are always a great starting point. Okay, so let's move into tip number 2, and that is going to be to say to learn some of the Lightroom shortcuts. There are loads of Lightroom shortcuts. Pretty much every key on your keyboard will do something in Lightroom, and some of them are really, really handy. One of the great ones I use is the X. If you go into the crop mode and you hit X, it will just toggle between a portrait image and a landscape image. If you press X again, it turns it back, but it keeps it the same size. So if you want to crop an image like a fair bit, you've got the ability with this to go. Let's just reset this real quick on the crop. You could hit it twice and it will give you a much closer crop that you can then just expand out a little bit and you've got a cropped image. But the best way I use it is to toggle between the portrait images and the landscape images, and I find that really, really useful. There's loads of others as well. I don't intend on using this video to go through every keyboard shortcut. Maybe that'll be another video, some of my favorite shortcuts, but learn some of the Lightroom shortcuts because they make your job a lot quicker. Okay, the third tip is going to be to say to try to learn to use the highlights and the shadows more so than you do the exposure. So for example here, this image is a little dark to me and I might want to add a little exposure. Now I probably am going to add a bit of exposure, but if I just added enough exposure to get the shadows across the player here in the right place, which would probably be about there, you can see that it has overdone all the highlights in the background. This advertising board is way too bright and it's almost distracting because it's too bright. So instead what I can do is, I'm going to add a little bit of exposure, but not much. And then I'm going to bring up the shadows. So the shadows of the player come up. You can see the effect that that has if I just toggle this switch. Now, you do have to be careful with shadows. If you go too high, it just makes the image almost look a bit cartoony. So you've got to be careful. You don't want to go too much. You almost need a balance of like, right, what's the right amount of exposure, right amount of shadows, and then you can use the highlights to bring some of those highlights back down. And again, you see what happens if I toggle with the highlight slider here. So let's say we probably end up around, where's a good combination? Probably about, I'm going to say about there. That's a pretty good combo. And you see we've used the sliders on the highlights and shadows much more heavily than we have on the exposure slider. And that's a real good place to work with. Don't go crazy with them, because as I said, if you go too much, it makes the image look silly. But you can certainly play with those and you will get a better effect than using the exposure slider to just fully brighten or darken your entire image. Okay, moving into tip number 4, and that's going to be about how you increase the saturation of your colors. Now you can see my preset has added a little bit of vibrance right here, but you'll see it's added no saturation. The reason why I do that is because I will always prefer that vibrance slider over the saturation slider. Let's just reset that vibrance so you can see what I mean. If I increase this saturation slider, it increases the saturation of every single color in that image. So if we get it up to, let's say there, the red on the guy's kit looks pretty good now actually, but you see what it's done to the grass, it's way too green, and you see what it's done to this yellow, it's just distracting in the image. So we don't want that. That's just too much saturation. Instead, what we can do is increase the vibrance a little bit. Now, what the vibrance slider does as opposed to the saturation slider is it will increase the vibrancy of colors, but it will not increase the saturation or oversaturate areas of color in your image that are already a high level of saturation. For example, this green or this yellow. So we can go pretty crazy with that if we want to. Again, you don't want to go too far because it will start to have a weird effect on your image. And that's probably the biggest advice I could give with every slider in Lightroom. Play around with it, learn what happens if you go way too far, learn what happens if you don't have enough, and then learn kind of where your sort of nice balance is in between and somewhere around there. The other thing I'm going to say about saturation of colors is learning how to use this HSL and color section in your development module on Lightroom. Now, this is a section that scares a lot of people, and there's really no reason to be at all. HSL simply stands for hue, saturation, and luminancy. And what this enables you to do is change each of those color profiles individually. So for the sake of this image, we're going to play around with the green for a minute, okay? We're going to start with the H, that's the hue. What this will do is it will change the hue of the green colors in your image. And if you look at the grass, you'll see what I mean here. All the way to the left makes that grass go kind of yellowy and it looks like the picture's died. All the way to the right-hand side makes it go almost turquoise, way too much. In the middle is kind of your sort of regular green level. That's what the hue does. If we then move up to the saturation slider, this will increase the saturation of that color. So again, watch the grass. We go all the way to there, we've got black and white grass. We go all the way to the top, we've got crazy saturated green, and we can put it back in the middle. And the luminance, a simple way to describe the luminance is it is almost the exposure of those colors in your image. So if you look again at the grass and we'll do the green, makes the grass and the green a lot darker and makes the green a lot brighter. And that's what the luminance does. So the best way in which you can use this is you can play with the saturation of just the colors you want to be increased. So if we want to brighten up this red or oversaturate that red, we can add a bit of saturation to the red. But what we're not doing is at the same time increasing all the saturation so the yellows are going crazy at the same time. In fact, what we could even do is decide, you know what, that yellow is a bit too distracting. So we could reduce it slightly. We don't want to go too far because if we do, it starts to affect other yellows in the images. You see there's some yellow on the ball that's gone in the background and this guy's skin tone has changed a little bit. But we could ever so slightly reduce those yellows if we wanted to. And so you see how you can start to use saturation or vibrance selectively rather than just saturating your entire image and ruining all of your colors. Okay, and for my last tip, I've actually come to a different set of images because I needed some images that didn't have much metadata in them. So this is going to be something that's going to save you guys a ton of time. Whatever you're using your photos for, making sure you've got something recorded in the metadata behind your images is really key. Now, especially for you guys who aren't using Photo Mechanic, this is a game changer. Photo Mechanic is a place where you can edit all the metadata before your images even hit Lightroom. But if you're not using that, you can set up a really simple preset for your metadata over here in the library module of Lightroom. The way you do that is you come in over here to the right hand side into the metadata. In the presets, we've currently got none. You can do edit presets. And over here, you can fill in some of the basic info. You can call this, I could call it Rob's basic info, something like that. And in here, I could just include some real basics like creator, Rob Sample. I could include some of my contact information. You see it's now got the box ticked, so that's now included. I could write things in here like, no unpaid use, my phone number, my email address, my website, things that say, hey, this image is copyright to me, to Rob Samples. You can edit so much information in here. But once you've done it all, you can then save that as a new preset. What that enables you to do is once you are then using, so hang on, I'm just going to cancel this, don't save. Once you're then importing your images, you can add this as a preset to every image that you want to import. So if you're importing 100 images, you could add the same simple metadata to every single one of those 100 images. And that could be as simple as copyright Rob Samples, etc., etc. The way you're going to do that over here, once we, select some photos to import, you could just say, I want to apply so-and-so a preset. Now, you see, I don't have saved ones in here because I do mine in Photo Mechanic, but if you've saved one, it would appear here on the list, and it's a place for you to better go, yeah, I want to apply that preset for metadata to all of my images. A really handy tip. So there we go. That's our 5 tips. Let's spin back around to round off our video. So there you go. I hope you guys found that useful. 5 tips that I think will help you improve your editing workflow. Maybe you're brand new to editing and you want to improve a little bit. Maybe you're an expert and you've learnt 1 or 2 little tricks or pointers that perhaps you didn't know before. Either way, I hope you found it useful. If you did, do me a favour, make sure you hit that like button. Comment below, let me know what you think. In the meantime, guys, thank you very much for watching. I will see you on the next video.